Well, good afternoon. My name is Trevor Batt, and I am here today on behalf of the Chesterfield Libraries. Our host, his name is Jesse Kelly. I believe, will be joining us in a few moments. He had another meeting to attend, but I'll be getting started here, and he'll be interacting a bit as we move forward through the presentation, and certainly towards the end when we do some questions and answers, and certainly turn it over to our participants today as well, the folks that are on that have joined in with us, and you are definitely free to ask questions. Then, and actually during the presentation as well, you should have a chat feature, hopefully, available there within the Zoom platform here. And if you have any questions in the meantime, as we're going through the material, I'll be sure to address those as we get to the end. So I think we will probably get started here. Maybe a few other folks will join. All right, hold on one second here. I have to unmute our host. One second. All right. Let's see here. Okay. Let's see.
Hey, Trev. Okay, great.
There you are. Okay. Sorry about that, Jesse. I'm not sure if I did that or not.
That's no problem at all. Yeah, well, I just wanted to thank you for offering the program. We're excited to hear what you have to say, and thanks everyone for coming. I would also like to thank the Friends of Chesterfield County Public Library for making this program possible. And so I'm going to get out of the way. I'm going to let Trev take over here, and he's a good guide, and he's going to give us some good information, I know.
All right, awesome. Thank you. Oh, and you may hear my dog chiming in. You never know. He's here. Actually, I mentioned to my wife, just, hey, be doing this presentation. If you can, see if the dog can keep a little quiet during the next hour. She mentioned that if anyone would like a standard poodle, 9 months old, house trained. Anyway, I'm just kidding. He's a good guy. I mean, he will be a good citizen eventually, but he is a puppy. So you never know what you might hear in the background there. But anyway, just wanted to go over a couple of the things just up front, what we'll be talking about. First of all, I want to mention why I think this topic is important to anyone who's a pre-retiree or retiree. What are the specific ways we can turn assets into income? And then not only just what, but how, right? So how to implement these ideas in your own your own life, your own accounts, your own financial planning process, or if you're working with an advisor, maybe things to kind of elbow them about as you go through this process. So then we'll do questions and answers, as I mentioned, and then there's a few other key financial planning reminders I'd like to discuss with everyone as well. All right, so just a very, very little bit about myself. I'm a practicing certified financial planner here in Chesterfield County, and I have a small business myself. So I'm a big fan, not only of folks that do really good financial planning, but I'm also a fan of the work the library is doing. Certainly, their mission is key to the success of people of all ages. And it's, of course, as I'm sure you know, if you're here, not just books, right? So really good programs and other content that they have available. Overall, I guess I feel, and I've seen this firsthand, that not enough is being done across the board. So whether it's in schools, whether it's at workplaces, not enough is being done to educate and empower individuals to make, give them the information to make good financial decisions. And so some people are fortunate enough that they can afford the cost of financial advice, quality financial advice, whether it's accounting, legal, someone like myself, whatever, but not everyone can do that, right? So that's where the library comes into play. with a lot of resources. So certainly love working together with the library to help empower folks to make good decisions and to really understand more about topics that maybe they've heard about, but they want to dig deeper into. So really appreciate your involvement today. All right, so let's get started now. And I've got a couple of cameras here in a couple of places. I think you can probably see my face. I don't know if that's a good thing, but I'm looking a couple of different ways here. So hopefully that won't be distracting with all the cameras and notes and so forth that I have. But let's get started on our topic today. So, really everyone needs a retirement paycheck, a paycheck in retirement, just like when you're working. The key difference, of course, is where the income comes from, where that paycheck comes from. Some may come from guaranteed sources like Social Security, and if you're lucky, a pension. However, most people also need to take income from savings accounts. For example, workplace savings accounts like 401ks, tax-deferred IRA accounts, after-tax brokerage or bank accounts, and maybe even inherited accounts. These accounts typically hold financial assets. So, cash, bonds, stocks, real assets like commodities and so forth that you've saved throughout your working years. So, we're going to talk about today are the two main approaches that you can use to take the lump sum of financial assets that you may have saved and efficiently turn those into paycheck-like income in a way that meets your retirement goals and fits into your personality. So let's talk about these two approaches in creating income retirement from assets. In order to identify them more clearly, we're going to give them names, and we're going to call the first the probability-based approach. And we're going to call the second the safety-first approach. I want to start before we start talking about the details of these particular approaches. I just want to start by saying that both options are totally viable and they're used by real people every single day. They may not use these distinctive names, but they use these techniques. Also, I want to be clear that there's no right or wrong approach. However, like most things in life, both of these options have their own unique pros and cons. Practitioners like myself know from working with many different types of people that your personality may direct you to lean towards one of these strategies over another. Okay, so let's talk about the first, our probability-based approach. In general, the way this approach works is you create income by withdrawing a portion of your account balances, effectively giving yourself a do-it-yourself DIY paycheck. While this money comes from the total balance in your accounts, the engine powering the growth of those dollars could be dividend payments from stocks. It could be interest rates from bonds, price appreciation from markets rising, or a combination of multiple factors. One of the advantages of this approach is that it's pretty simple and it's intuitive to implement. Your assets grow over time and you withdraw a fixed amount on a regular schedule. For example, $1,000 a month. The viability of this approach is based around the idea that if you have modest, steady positive returns from a portfolio comprised of, an equal amount of both stocks and bonds, that over the long term, the assets in the account will last through your entire lifetime. The good news is that the recent 30-year history of most stock and bond combinations has shown this to be a successful approach. But there's a lot of assumptions here, and there's some very specific parameters that need to constrain your decision-making in order to ensure these funds last for, say, 30 years of retirement. The safe withdrawal amount calculation, it's going to be different for every person, and it's a bit beyond the scope of this presentation. But historically, a starting point that's been used in the past is withdrawing 4% of your investable assets and then increasing that withdrawal each year by the amount of inflation. So to start with, for example, if you had $500,000 in assets at the start of your retirement, again, just round numbers, your safe withdrawal amount would be $20,000 per year or $1,667 per month. Ultimately, this withdrawal concept is based on averages and probability. the probability that you'll have an average life expectancy, the probability that your portfolio returns an average of a certain amount each year, and so forth. So it's important to note that a key factor that's been a major contributor to the success of this approach over the past several decades is that interest rates fell from the late 70s until last year. So on top of the interest payments provided by bonds, bond prices rose as interest rates fell. Stocks also benefit from falling interest rates. And as you may be aware, interest rates are heading back up again. And as inflation is heating up, it would seem unlikely that rates are going to head back to the historically unprecedented low levels that we saw last year. That brings into question the level of success that this strategy will have going forward. It's not that this strategy won't work, but if rates continue to rise, the safe withdrawal rate will be lower. Maybe it's 2%, maybe it's 3%. Bottom line, though, is if the rate is lower, that would lower your income, your safe amount of income that you can take. All right, one of the main advantages of the probability-based approach is that you retain full and complete control over all of your assets. And you have the potential to take advantage of the theoretically unlimited upside of financial markets, especially equity stock markets. Again, that's been a real benefit since certainly stocks have increased in value over the long term. The main disadvantage is really the opposite. That falling markets, especially over a multi-year period, and if you're unlucky early on in retirement, can cause this strategy to fail and you run out of money when you're still alive. This would likely cause you to have to dramatically scale back your standard of living and your goals. The other approach that we're calling safety first involves taking assets and creating a guaranteed income stream using an annuity purchased from an insurance company. Before I go any further, I just want to acknowledge that some people seem to have an inherent objection to annuities. I'm not sure why. I mean, the term annuity really just refers to a stream of income payments. Social Security and pensions are annuities as well, but they're funded through payroll deductions and employers during working years rather than in a lump sum. If I had to guess, I'd assume that any bad press has to do with annuities that are sold to people that don't need them. For example, people that already have sufficient guaranteed income. Sometimes they're sold for growth and not income, like variable annuities that are filled with stock stock mutual funds that are often very expensive, or people that are sold annuities without an accompanying holistic financial plan. So sort of as a standalone type investment vehicle. Remember, there's plenty of stocks, bonds, and commodities out there that are unsuitable for one person, but ideal or excellent for another. So it's never fair to dismiss an entire asset class. Financial instruments, whatever they may be, are tools that in the right hands and for the right purpose and right person or family can get the job done efficiently and effectively. One other side note that's important to remember is that you should be skeptical of anyone giving conflicted advice, air quotes, that stands to benefit from the bashing of one asset class or another. So, for example, it would be hard to take anyone seriously who says, hey, stocks are going to crash. You should invest in gold, which, by the way, I can sell you, right? So the main advantage of annuities from an income planning perspective is that you can't outlive the income stream. Whether we're talking about pensions or Social Security, they're all annuities. This type of approach fits best with folks that are risk adverse and that are willing to trade market upside for safety and security. Overall, this approach gives people that are skeptical of future market returns peace of mind that they'll be able to count on their annuity income just like they count on, say, Social Security. Plus, nowadays, many annuities have features that will give you the ability to access some of your principal during your lifetime. And if you pass before withdrawing all of your accumulated value, your beneficiaries will receive what's left of your initial investment. That means that with many income annuities, you don't completely lose control of your investment, as was common in the past. So let's talk about the downsides of annuities from an income planning perspective. Though some annuities have a growth component, it's typically going to be constrained. So you're not going to get the potential unlimited upside of stocks with a safety first approach. Also, while some annuities have income that increases, it's not very common. So typically annuities won't provide inflation protection. But then again, neither do most pensions. Again, an annuity. Social Security technically does provide a cost of living adjustment, but then, of course, if you're getting Social Security, you may know that the government just raises your Medicare premiums, which often offsets much of the increased income. I don't know about you, but from what we've all seen over the past year or so, I think it's true that our society is becoming what seems to be more and more polarized. And it's no surprise that people have very strong opinions about what approach to income generation is right. But I'm not going to be hosting a retirement income battle royale because the reality is these strategies are actually complementary and are most effective when paired as a team. Academic research and practitioner experience shows that retirement income plans that combine the control and unlimited upside of market assets like stocks and the safety and security of annuities improve both retirement plan outcomes and lead to greater peace of mind in retirement. Okay, let me show you an example of how to structure a financial plan to combine both of these strategies. And before we do that, first, we're going to discuss the 4 most common financial priorities for retirement. Longevity is the first one. If you live for decades after retirement, which a lot of people are doing, you'll need to fund living expenses like your everyday bills, food, shelter, etc. This is probably the most important need for anyone, not just retirees. Liquidity. Liquidity is having the cash available that you need to fund emergency spending like unexpected medical expenses or a home repair. This is also a very important need. So these first 2 are definitely critical. The next 2 may not be as necessary for survival, but are nonetheless definitely a part of most retirees' goals and priorities. Lifestyle is the next one. These are typically larger, irregular expenses like maybe travel, a new car, putting an addition on your home, that sort of thing. And the final item is legacy. This means different things to different people, but it's common for retirees to want to be able to provide, say, an inheritance for their children, or maybe a college education for a grandchild, perhaps fund a favorite charity. So those are the 4 main retirement goals. So once you've thought about and determined how your specific goals fit into those big picture categories, we need to figure out how to align your resources and assets most efficiently and in a way that will maximize their usefulness. So let's go back through the list and tackle these one at a time. So living expenses are recurring and would be more or less the same on an ongoing basis. This is a perfect fit for guaranteed income, whether that be Social Security and a pension and or potentially an annuity. So this is really important. Don't miss this part. The secret to a stress-free retirement is to ensure that all of your living expenses are covered by your guaranteed income. This way, you don't have to be concerned about what happens day to day with financial markets, knowing that market volatility is not going to impact your core living expenses. Issues occur when a portion of expenses are covered by guaranteed income, and the rest has to be made up from an investment portfolio. Now, for some people with really large investment portfolios, that may not be a concern, but for most folks, having negative returns in any given any given time period could potentially be an issue. What happens when you're funding a portion of living expenses with assets is that can create a misalignment, and it's especially critical for women who live longer than men. Under the probability approach, which we talked about earlier, it's possible to run out of investment assets if you're pulling income from a portfolio when markets are performing poorly. It's like dollar cost averaging, which is said to be like the 8th wonder of the world, but it's in reverse. I know it's possible because I've seen it happen that if you use assets to fund living expenses, it can cause you to come up short of income later in retirement. Okay, liquidity is next, and this is addressed by keeping enough cash for emergencies in an FDIC insured bank account. This would not be a place for a CD that has a long surrender period or assets like stocks that could drop in value when you need them most. The amount of liquid assets you maintain is going to be different for every person and family, but keeping enough cash to fund 3 to 6 months of non-discretionary living expenses would be a good place to start. A diversified portfolio full of market-based assets is an ideal location to fund both lifestyle and legacy goals, especially those goals that are more than a few years out. Discretionary lifestyle spending goals are typically much more flexible than mandatory living expenses. Think about what happened if you had an international trip planned for last summer. It probably got canceled, right? And you didn't have that expense, but no big deal. Maybe you want to double up on travel this year or next. But of course, during that period of time, you still had to eat and pay property taxes and so forth. So those living expenses still persist. The inherent variability that's a feature of an investment portfolio full of market-based assets is fine for non-essential lifestyle goals. If values do change dramatically up and down, you can plan accordingly. Legacy goals are also a really great fit for market-based assets, especially stocks, because typically individuals that you may be passing assets to are going to be younger than you are, and they'd have a higher risk tolerance and risk capacity, which is better suited for higher volatility and higher upside potential assets. Now, I know that there are some very fortunate individuals and families that already have enough guaranteed income or assets to cover all of their living expenses, no matter how much money they spend. Also, there are people that, for whatever reason, have very low expenses or very modest goals that are fully covered by Social Security and maybe a pension. And if you're one of those people, that's great. I mean, I consider folks in that position to have one retirement. But the reality is most retirees will need some combination of guaranteed income and assets that they've saved to achieve all of their retirement goals. So what we've discussed today is a rigorous financial planning framework that I use in my own practice. It's based on math and behavioral science. It's not my creation. It's a framework that's used by many financial planning firms and individual advisors. And while I think that it can be adapted and used for many people in their unique life situations, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And unfortunately, today we don't have the time to do a case study or discuss specific examples in detail. But if you'd like more information, you're welcome to reach out at any time. Contact info is at the end of the presentation. So let's transition back to our host, Jesse, who I believe has some questions, and addressing some of those will maybe clarify some additional points about this process of turning assets to income. Jesse, are you there? One of the things I wanted to definitely touch on while Jesse gets on there, and I don't know if he's having trouble. I have to unmute him. I'm not sure how I must have. Let's see here. Participants. Okay. Did that work?
All right, Trev, there we go.
All right. Sorry about
Excellent.
that. Sorry about that.
No, that's no problem. So I've been listening and been thinking about this topic since we scheduled this event. And we hear a lot about each administration coming in office. Taxes can fluctuate. Sometimes taxes go up, sometimes taxes go down. We've been hearing some about higher taxes coming in, and I'm wondering, how do we prepare or plan for the fluctuation in taxes?
Sure. No, that's a really good question. That's definitely a topic I think is really important. That's kind of tangential to, anytime you're talking about income, you have to talk about taxes, right? Because that's how our tax system works. Our tax system works by primarily taxing income and not assets. And so really, the tax impacts of any investment decision whether it's for income or for other purposes, are definitely something you'll want to keep in mind. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a surprise at the end of the year. The one thing for sure to keep in mind with pre-tax deferred accounts like IRAs is that you have a co-owner, right? And it's the IRS. So you really technically don't own all that money. We don't know, when, and your tax, right? When you withdraw it. So it grows. If you don't withdraw it before I think it's 72 now, you end up being forced to withdraw it. And then the IRS gets their taxes at that point. As far as what the specific impact is, we never know what that is, right? We don't know what tax rates are going to be going forward, but I think it's fair and reasonable to assume that they're going to increase. If you've, seen some of the spending the federal government has been doing lately and over the last year in particular, you just have to assume that A, inflation's going up, and B, taxes are going up, right? So the specifics of on who and how much and when, we really have no idea. But I think the key takeaway on taxes for income planning is to ensure that when you're budgeting for the amount of income you're going to receive, make sure that you take into account the fact that the gross withdrawal and net amount, so the difference between your, if you're taking out $1,000 and then what you have to spend, that's going to be different. There's going to be a difference there. And so whether you withhold when you do the withdrawal throughout the year or just pay the tax bill at the end of the year, taxes are just another expense that you're going to need to take into account.
All right. Excellent. Okay. Very good. So this is something I see on television a lot. Reverse mortgage, getting income from reverse mortgage. Do you have an opinion on, is this a good idea, or who is this for? Who is it not for?
Sure. And, reverse mortgages actually could be a strategy that could be included in a presentation like this. I mentioned two of the main options, the sort of safety first approach and then a probability based approach. Another option to augment income that not everyone is super familiar with is this concept of reverse mortgages. And really what it is, if you're not familiar, is it's instead of paying a mortgage, you're getting the payment from your house, essentially. So instead of making a payment, you're getting a payment. And really what's happened over the last, say, 5 to 10 years, even just that relatively short amount of time, is that these products and providers, which are insurance companies and mortgage companies and so forth, there's been increased regulation, and that's a good thing in this case. I wouldn't have thought of myself as saying increased regulation is an awesome thing, but in this case, it definitely is. It really has helped standardize some of the options out there on the market, and it helps consumers know that they're not going to get abused by a predatory lender, right? So I'd say it can definitely be an option in the right situation. I mean, of course, you have to own a home, right? And the home has to have a lot of equity. So that's a factor and not something that everyone has. It's a good plan B worth considering if the two options we discussed today don't fully work. I think the other place where it works really well is if you need long-term care in your home and you want to kind of get that income from the value of the home. So definitely something to consider there as well.
Well, you mentioned long-term care, and that's another thing I see a lot of commercials about. Can you tell me a little bit more about long-term care insurance and how that fits into, how we should be planning and thinking about our retirement?
Sure, and long-term care is a whole topic in itself, and no surprise, we're going to do one, right? Of course, we scheduled that, and I'm looking forward to doing an entire presentation next month on the different ways to address long-term care planning, or the additional ways, or all the ways you can fund long-term care needs. But at the end of the day, whether it's long-term care costs themselves or long-term care insurance costs, those are really just living expenses, right? So they're mandatory expenses. They need to be included in your budget, in your planning, in your financial planning during your planning process, right? So the difference between the actual costs of long-term care, if you have them, right, or when you have them, and say your water bill, which is another mandatory kind of expense, is that long-term care, it's really expensive. And, we'll talk more about that when we do our presentation, when I do my presentation next month. But, it's really, it's definitely something to, to keep in mind. The thing is, and what you might want to keep in mind is that if you're in a situation where you need to go to a facility-based place, so somewhere outside of your home, like assisted living or a nursing home, it's possible that many of your home-based expenses are going to drop. So that could lower your expenses, but not if it's only, one of two spouses that needs to go to that location, because obviously you would need to retain your home for the other spouse. So at the end of the day, and I can talk very personally and sort of passionately about long-term care needs, because I had a mother who's passed away, but who had dementia and who needed care. And so this is really kind of what got me started on my own personal financial journey of transitioning into this career, is because I saw how this was affecting my own family personally. So it's not something you can always plan for from an, I'm going to absolutely know what the cost of this particular liability is, but there's certainly some things we can do. Redirecting income from other goals, your reverse mortgage, like we talked about, is an option that can help, but really kind of thinking through fully what your own personal risks may be, and deciding whether or not it would be possible to kind of hedge those risks with some sort of insurance policy is definitely something that we'll talk more about, I think, next month as well.
Well, and this is about it for me, but I'm curious, when we're designing our investment portfolio, what do you think about people who need to get income focusing on divided paying stocks?
Oh, sure. So like dividends, right? Yeah. So, that's I'd say a very reasonable strategy, right? A lot of retirees look to dividend paying stocks as a source of income, just like they would look to bonds that pay, that have coupon payments. So that would be, certainly, a reasonable strategy for at least a portion of your stock allocation. But actually, it's a good reason, but not for the sort of intuitive income reason that you might think, right? So let me just step back for a second. So the assumption that a lot of people make is that with dividends, you're kind of receiving free money. It's not really free money, because really the dividend is a part of the total return of that particular investment, right? So the total return is made up of two things. It's made up of price appreciation or depreciation. So whether a stock, for example, goes up or down. And then in addition, it would be the amount of income you would receive as well from dividends, if any. And of course, not all stocks pay dividends. The reality is you could actually create your own synthetic dividend by selling a portion of a stock that doesn't normally pay dividends. So what I really like about the dividend paying strategy or dividend paying stocks in general is that the companies that do that pay dividends are typically high quality. So that's really the primary reason I think the dividend strategy makes sense, is because the companies are high quality. You just have to keep in mind, though, that the dividend paying companies, they're often concentrated in just a handful of sectors. So, for example, energy, financials, consumer staples, those tend to be the types of companies that pay dividends. And so you may want to be careful that you don't overweight your stock allocation with those sectors in particular by, sort of loading up on dividends. Dividends also, or dividend paying stocks also sometimes act like long-term bonds, and dramatic increases in interest rates can also affect dividend stocks in ways that normal stocks a mixed basket, let's just say, wouldn't be affected as much. So the other thing to keep in mind, and this is something we've seen really recently within the last 12 months, is that dividends are definitely not guaranteed. The whole significant dip that the market took at the beginning of last year, or in the spring of last year, well, what we saw immediately after was a lot of companies were cutting their dividends, really at the time when people needed that income the most. So, dividend stocks, as far as individual stocks, can let you down. You really want to, if you are going to go that route, make sure you're diversifying into a broad basket of dividend paying stocks, so you're not reliant on one particular company or a handful of companies. Even you really want to have at least 30, and ideally some sort of low cost fund that's going to generate income. And staying away from the highest dividend payers that are typically in financial distress is a good idea. Definitely a good concept. Big picture, it makes sense, I think, because of the overall quality there when you have a diversified portfolio of dividend payers. But just there are some risks there, so just be a little mindful of that.
Last question for me, Trev, and then I'm going to get out of the way. I'm curious, when I was researching for this, I found this this new trend of kind of automated financial advisors, or robo financial advisors that are meant to take out the human element in financial advice. Can you tell me why the human element is still important, when we think about financial guidance and advice?
Sure. Well, I hope if it's a robot we're going to talk to, I hope it's a nice robot, because I've seen some mean robots in movies, and I hope it's not one of those. But overall, yeah, I don't think that that automated advice, which is highly standardized, right? And that's what you're going to get with automation. You're going to get highly standardized advice. I don't think it's going to replace human interaction, especially for pre-retirees and retirees themselves in sort of a financial planning relationship, whether it be income planning, whether it be investment planning, insurance planning, whatever it may be. I just don't think that you can replace that human element of really understanding someone's situation and learning about them as you're sitting across the table with them face to face, as of course we're now able to do. So, and really, that's because everyone's situation is so unique and different. You just think about the difference between buying a product versus buying a service, right? So many products we buy are high volume and low customization, right? So that would be like, I don't know, a can of soda, right? It's very much the same no matter where you buy it. Everyone gets the same can of Coke, right? But services, they're low volume and high customization. So that would be like, I don't know, like a haircut, right? You're not going to get the same haircut as everyone else. Your hair is different from everyone else's. So I don't know. I just don't see the financial profession being able to commoditize meaningful advice for retirees due to the complexity of the planning process for those individuals and families. I do think there's potential for, so-called robo advice for accumulators. Sometimes people that are in their 20s and 30s and 40s, they're often called accumulators because really they're just trying to accumulate as much assets as possible and save for retirement. The advice they need is a bit more straightforward. Don't spend more than you make, save money for retirement, so on and so forth. But that's really, I think, the space where that sort of advice is targeted. I think the person-to-person interfacing on something as complex and sensitive as income planning or financial planning for retirees, I think is really going to remain, fortunately.
Well, Trev, they say the same thing about librarians. They're going to take us away too. The robots are going to take the librarians' jobs. What is the fun in that?
Yes. Well, and coming from someone who remembers an actual physical card catalog from libraries, I can say I'm right there with you. I love the real librarians.
Yes, that's good to hear, Trevor. Well, excellent. So I'm wondering, is there anything else you'd like to share with us, or do we have any questions out there? Go
Yeah, let
ahead.
me just mention a couple other things real quickly that I think are relevant, and then we'll take any questions if anyone has them. So anytime I talk to a group larger than just my wife, who's heard me say this way too many times, I'm sure, but I love to talk about just the very core things of financial planning, core concepts, and just great kind of things to keep in mind for your life, for the life of yourself and your family, and for your children, your grandchildren, your neighbors. This is just kind of the blocking and tackling of financial planning. I really think it's super important that everyone needs to have estate planning documents. So there's a handful of basic estate planning documents that are just critical. Everyone needs them. It really surprises me how many people don't have, and people that are older and with children or multiple children, don't have a basic will. Advanced medical directive, medical power of attorney, super important. You may have been to the doctor's office and they've asked for that. Maybe you had it. Hopefully you did. If you didn't, maybe it prompted you to get one. But this is super important as well. And for sure, when you're talking about accounts that don't go through the probate process, that the accounts that are like the brokerage type accounts or whatnot, you make sure you have your current beneficiary designations in there to ensure that the folks that you want to receive those assets that transfer right away at death, make sure those people are identified specifically. So it's certainly a good reminder there. So another topic related to overall sort of risk management. It's just like kind of a fancy term for I guess maybe insurance, but health insurance, of course, a lot of people have it either through work or for retirees or Medicare. But that's more of an item that I mentioned to younger audiences, because certainly I think people much younger than me, don't always think they need it. You do. Disability insurance is super important for people that are working. It's actually far more important than really even life insurance, because it's so much more likely that you're going to have some sort of work stoppage due to an injury or illness than you would to sort of suddenly pass away. But life insurance really important to definitely for folks with children. And then property insurance, not just home and auto, but also if you have a larger liability, an umbrella policy is relatively inexpensive. So something to keep in mind there. And another topic that you hear of all the time in the news is credit monitor or credit breaches, right? Your social security number was stolen. It was misappropriated. It was compromised. We're really sorry, all that kind of stuff. That's why you need proactive. Everybody needs it, whether you've gotten it because your credit was breached or you have to buy it for $10 a month. It's cheap insurance, proactive real-time credit monitoring. It has saved me personally. I suggest it to everyone I speak with. The other thing I like to talk about just really briefly as we kind of wrap up, this portion of the presentation, just a couple things to keep in mind. There are 4 things that have been scientifically linked to happiness, and they are none of them are money, right? So friends and family, forgiveness, giving, and gratitude. It's always a great time to think about this stuff. And anytime we talk about money, I like to, which I do a lot all the time, I like to kind of pivot my focus to other topics that are really important for people of all ages, right? And things that, you may want to extra special keep in mind, especially with the environment we're just emerging from, and separation from folks and so forth. So always a great opportunity to be thankful and forgive people, spend time with friends and family, and give your time or money, whatever it is. So money, of course, is not on here. And if, when you do spend money, again, another thing that has been linked to great happiness or greater happiness is spending money on experiences rather than things. We all have things that have broken, become outdated, rusted, crashed, whatever. So thinking about spending time with the people we care about, friends and family, is a great way to spend resources as well. So anyway, that is basically all that I had to share today. Does anyone have any questions? And I'm going to hopefully be able to unmute everyone. Let's see here. Actually, I don't even know if I can do that. Maybe we'll just use the chat. Does anyone have any questions? I don't know that I see any other questions in the chat. So we'll just hang out for a moment. And how long did we go? 45 minutes. We're about on time. Okay, well, I don't see any questions. Oops. I didn't see any questions in the chat. If anyone has any follow-up questions after the presentation today, you're welcome to reach out to me. I'd love to hear your feedback on if you thought this sort of thing was valuable. I love partnering with the library, and I've done other, I'm going to continue to do other sessions for all ages on all different topics related to financial planning and financial fitness and financial health. So definitely appreciate you supporting this presentation by attending. So thanks for your time. And I think we're about done, Jesse. I don't see any other questions.
Excellent, Trev. Thanks so much for offering that. It was really informative. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a great day.
Yes, sir. Just want to